Startup videos. All right, we're live. Welcome to the Liquid Swan channel. Thanks for tuning in. I have Marty Up North here. We met at the We Unify conference in Victoria back in June, and he's a pretty awesome guy. So I just wanted to say thank you, Marty, for coming on.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Yeah, that was a great conference. The conference surprised me, actually. To be honest, I was quite surprised.
Yeah, I was. It was definitely interesting. Because like we don't really get a lot of that stuff here in Victoria, where we have like all the people coming here. Usually, I have to travel to meet people like yourself and
Yeah.
I guess Lauren Southern and all that. So it was kind of nice because it's really convenient for me. I could just basically wake up in the morning and head down there.
Well, and there were people afterwards who there were very few complaints about the conference. The only complaint I heard from people was that it was in Victoria, and I'm like, well, every conference can't be in Winnipeg or Toronto. It's nice to spread the conferences, across the country. But for me, what was really surprising is that I'm an Albertan, and I have cousins on both sides. I got my Saskatchewan cousins, which are pretty conservative. And to show up at a conference like this in Victoria and BC, I mean, I think of you guys as basically, being pretty socialist, but I was pleasantly surprised at the turnout of freedom-loving, conservative-minded, right-leaning people that showed up. It was really fun.
Well, there are a lot of sort of like the island has like some communities that are pretty let's say conservative, but like Victoria's, because it's a university town and a government town, there's a lot of people here that just sort of like live off the dole, or they're going to school for 15 years or whatever, so they're a little bit left winger. But I find it usually you can find people like I thought I was the only one here for a long time, like in my sphere, and that's one of the reasons I really want to talk to you, is because like I have sort of a sphere that's like I didn't know that you existed, and I didn't know Clyde existed, and it was really interesting to see that there is actually people out there that aren't in the sphere I'm in, which means that we've been sort of like fenced off from each other for some reason. Like the algorithm or something has fenced us off from each other. And even though I think we share quite a bit of, I'd say our overlap is probably like close to 90%, if it's not more than that.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting comment. I mean, the algorithm is something that many of us try to figure out, but at the end of the day, you can't. I reach out to like-minded individuals, but I also try to reach out to, I don't want to be stuck in an echo chamber. So I reach out to all sorts of people. But to your point, like why we hadn't connected before, that's, sometimes that's just luck. That's just random. I mean, Canada, the other thing is we're a small community in Canada, right? I mean, I'm a relatively big account by Canadian standards, but miniature by American standards. I mean, Americans have accounts with millions of viewers in the US are common.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Well, we met now, so that's the good thing, right? And that's the purpose of the conference. I mean, the conference was neat because we meet in person. I still come across people who think of online friends as something like not real, and it's like, no, online friends, man, like friends. I've made friendships on Twitter and YouTube and Instagram and other places that are genuine. I mean, these are people like Clyde, like you mentioned, Clyde. I mean, me and Clyde talk every week online and meet in person once in a while. And, my wife, for instance, always thinks that that's a little weird that you have online friends, but it's like, yeah, it's the way of the world nowadays. In fact, that's an amazing thing, right? Like, look at, 100 years ago, who would I have met? Like the people, 100 years ago, my ancestors lived in a small town of 2,000 people. My God, like the people you met was like the other 1,999. But now I can meet people all around the world. Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. Like with the organization I'm with, or spend a lot of time with, like I spoke at a conference in 2023. So last year in June, so around the same time as the We Unify conference in Tennessee, and it's through Shieldings and the Beowulf Foundation. They're a little bit. I think there's a little bit overlap. Like I think they're out of Europe, so it's a little bit different. It was the CEO was a Canadian for a while, Black Horse, but it's inspiring to know that there's groups that are doing things like taking action. And yeah, okay, like I might be the only one in Victoria or the West Coast. There's a couple of people in Vancouver, but like there are people all across Canada, and like in Alberta. Alberta's a interesting topic because a lot of their conservatism came from a lot of the Americans that went across the border in the 30s.
Yep.
Like my grandma, she was from Oregon, and they're from like a farming town near Portland, and Portland is now. But they moved up there because the land was cheap for farming, and I guess they wanted to get their own farm. So, but then so she grew up as a farm girl. But anyways, I wanted to since you're here, I want you to talk more about yourself. I did read that you're 12th generation Canadian. Is that true?
Yeah, no, that's 100% truthful. It's
what can you tell me about your family history? Like I'm interested in genealogy myself. I've done a lot of tracing.
Yeah, well, so the passion for genealogy comes from my dad and others before me. Mm-hmm. My family comes from I'm originally from Ontario, but I can trace back my last name is Boulanger. I'm not afraid to say that. It's and in French, I speak French. I'm Franco-Ontarian, so my last name is Bélanger. And it's easy to trace back to a guy named François Bélanger who came here in 1634 in Quebec City, and because he's well documented because he was a colonist who signed a contract with a company from France, and he settled in just outside Quebec City in 1634. Met a young girl on the boat. She was the daughter of two other colonists, and he married her. He was 22, and he married a 13-year-old girl in 1635. Yeah. You had no choice in those days, right? Think about that poor guy. He lands in Upper Canada. He's given a plot of land, and he has to get busy building his own cabin. You have to have your own skills. Nobody's going to build it for you. Mm-hmm. And so you got to get married quickly so that somebody can cook and start taking care of the chickens and planting a garden, because he landed here, let's say May, June, and he's got to get busy for the first winter. Mm-hmm. And then he had 13 kids, and 10 of them were boys. So within one generation, just outside the outskirts of Quebec City, there was 11 families with my last name, and then we went from there. And they were Roman Catholics. I'm Roman Catholics, and the church kept good records, and the church in this instance was in one town. So literally, you could go through before the advent of the genealogy software, you could just quickly get somebody to do the family history and trace it back. So and so there was about 10 generations in Quebec City, and then one of them left for Ontario, and then another one was born in Ontario, and then I left Ontario and came to Alberta in 1990. So and then I have 3 sons and a daughter, so there are 13 generations. And we're waiting for the 14th at some point.
That's very cool, man. Like, congratulations on your family and stuff. That's awesome. Like, it's tough these. I I have 3 kids as well. It's tough to have them these days, though, I find. But to tell you the truth, I don't think it really costs that much money, unless you're going to send them to Harvard and stuff. But if they really want to go there, maybe they can work that out. Work out on their own.
It's a weird. Double-edged sword. I mean, having kids can be more expensive, but it's also less expensive. Mm-hmm. What I tell people is, the first one takes some adjusting to. The second one is a little bit expensive. If you decide to have a third one, then you're going to organize yourself accordingly. You'll get the minivan, and you'll probably get bunk beds in a room. And then by the time you have a fourth one or a fifth one, reality kicks in, right? I mean, so we had to make some sacrifices. For instance, I wasn't going to Mexico with the family every winter. You can't. Yeah. It'd be too expensive. But then the other thing that happens is you learn to say no, and no becomes it's not an option. If my kid said I want to play 3 sports, I'd be like, no. You can each play 1. So once we had more kids, life actually became easier than just 2. So I've told that to people. Don't. And besides, if you want to have kids and you enjoy family, you'll find a way to make it work. That's I mean, maybe I'm speaking. I love having a big family. I come from a big family. I love having a big family. So wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, same. I agree. I came from. Well, I only had a brother and a half brother. but like my parents, they each had 3 or 4 siblings each, depending on which one.
Yep.
And but I had, and so on my dad's side, I had like, I think I was part of a 10 or so cousin cohort, which was nice. I think I was the second youngest, but I think I was one of the first ones to have a kid though, because I had him when I was 18. But
Yeah,
but
well, and anybody like just as a coincidence, I mean, we're empty nesters right now. My kids are all older, but
mm,
then two of them are home this evening. And people who follow me on Twitter have seen my little story of the last 10 days. My daughter bought a new condo, and I've been helping her renovate it. But then her brothers, my sons, they all come over. So, evenings there'd be like the whole family would be at my daughter's place doing work. And you make short work of anything when you bring in, a family clan of 6, 7 people. It's including the girlfriends and the fiancés and whatnot. So we renovated a whole condo in like 70 hours. It's pretty cool.
that's pretty impressive. Many hands make for light work, as they
Exactly.
say.
Yep.
So about yourself, what's your background? You're in engineering or something, or what do you do?
Yeah, I like I said, I went to grew up in Ontario. Went to university in Ottawa. I don't like to admit it too much. It was actually a good school in those days, and the reason I went there is because I am Franco-Ontarian and I do speak French. So the University of Ottawa was bilingual. When I was going through school, the school had something called the co-op program. You work 4 months, study 4 months, work 4 months. So being an Ontarian, I did the classic thing. I studied engineering, so my first 2 work terms were in the automotive industry, working for Chrysler, and then I wanted to diversify and try and experience something different. Looking at the job board, and I see these jobs in Alberta, and nobody's applying for them, and I'm like, wait, let me get this straight. You're going to pay me to fly me across the country, house me somewhere, teach me something really cool. What's the catch? Like, and nobody else, none of my friends in Ontario wanted anything to do with Alberta. And I'm like, oh, screw it. I'm going to Alberta. Did a couple of work terms. And then when it came and quite honestly, like I found my people. I tell this to I describe myself as a sort of a redneck, pragmatic, right-leaning individual, but I didn't become that way because I came to Alberta. I was that way, but I didn't know it until I came to Alberta, and then I found my people. And then once I graduated, I came back here full time in northern Alberta in a small town called Fox Creek, where I was an engineer in the oil industry, and then. That was 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago. That was in 1990. So I spent I worked in the oil patch, in the oil industry in small towns and around the world for 32 years. It was so good to me as an industry that I actually retired at the beginning of this year, and I'm 57 right now.
Oh, that's great. My father-in-law, he's an engineer in Brazil in the oil industry, and I mean, it got all screwed up because of the Petrobras scandal. Which wasn't anything to do with him. He was just a victim of the all the shutdowns and stuff. But he ended up retiring and then starting work again. And so he's kind of still working on and off, I suppose. But because it's the oil industry, you can always kind of come back if you got the skills. But no,
and I'm in that boat. I announced that I was retiring. I took an extra step to try and force myself to retire. I declared myself as a non-practicing engineer. So. But that's not stopping anyone from calling me. I get calls all the time, and it does prove, there are, well, think of our liberal government in Ottawa, like Trudeau wants to ban gasoline powered vehicles and this and that and go to a net zero grid and stuff like that. It's ideological nonsense. I mean, the planet is consuming 100 million barrels of oil per day, like not per week or per month or per year, per day. And the rest of the world wants to enjoy the freedoms and when I say freedoms, I mean real freedoms, like, cheap energy allows you to have leisure time. Like you don't need to, walk somewhere to pump water and spend time chopping wood by hand. When you have energy, life becomes easier, and then you end up having leisure and free time. And so the rest of the world wants what we, North Americans have had for decades. So oil's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Not in the near term. No way.
Thank God. I was going to ask you a question. So yeah, that has to do with infrastructure. And one of the things I like to talk to people about is like how we have all like my wife's an immigrant. Okay, so I'm not against immigration, but like the amount of infrastructure the infrastructure deficit we have right now is so insane that like we keep bringing more people in, so we keep jamming more and more people in, and they have this plan. The government has some plan to like expand the population to 100 million by 2100. Have you heard of this?
Yep.
The century?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I did some math on that, just like with water, like water infrastructure. So if you say a person needs about 2 liters of water a day just to live, if you expand the population that big by that time, and if you even with the infrastructure growth we have right now, we would run out of water to like sustain life for the humans that are present, and we wouldn't have enough houses and stuff as well and all this other stuff. But so it's just crazy. And I think a couple years ago, you might know more about this than me as an engineer, but 2 years ago we were something like 20, at least in my area, we were 20 years behind in infrastructure development, and now we're like even further behind in terms of years. Do you know more about this?
No, well, there's a lot to unpack there. So, yeah, I agree with you. First of all, yes, I'm the same way. I mean, I'm pro immigration. You know, I've been here a long time, like I said, many generations. But the fact is, I am a descendant of somebody who came here. And the country's huge, right? I mean, we have a small population. We could handle a lot of people. But you're right. We need to bring them in at a pace where A, they don't create a problem, and B, we allow them, you know, in fairness. I mean, if you're an immigrant who comes here, you also need to integrate, right? You need to learn how to, you know, the rules, how we do things. I mean, you can come from a country and suddenly, you know, how do you order food here? How do you do your groceries? How do you set up your telephone system? Stuff like that. So we're bringing them in too quickly and not giving them a chance to integrate. And I agree with the infrastructure. I mean, I live in Calgary. Look at what happened to us this summer. Like we had a water line break that forced water restrictions we're going on 6 or 7 weeks now, and that's just a symptom of what you said. Like we're barely keeping up with the existing infrastructure, never mind trying to add the infrastructure. So and we're letting in big numbers. Like this is a topic I'm near and dear to me. I mean, I tweet about this all the time. Like Canada's population went from about 37 million people 3 years ago to 41. Like that's 4 million people. That's 10%. Like when you add 10% in a short time, even the Americans who have like this wide open border and people are flooding in across the American border from Mexico, the Americans are looking north and going, you guys are nuts, man. Because, they let in 9 million, which is about 2% of their population. We let in 4 million, which is 10%. It's unsustainable. It's too big of a number. It's way too big of a number.
Yeah, and it's not like they're building new towns either. Like they're not, they're just jamming them all in the same towns that they've always jammed them in, and just making life brutal there.
And infrastructure. I mean, that's one of the reasons I retired as an engineer, is because I became frustrated. The permitting process to build anything, to get approval to build anything, it's so they wear you down. They just wear you down. Like, I just want to build a school. I just want to build a bridge. I just want to build a road. I just want to, and people are blocking you. I mean, I'm we could talk about this topic all day long. So I agree. It's immigration is too fast in too short a time.
Well, I started an LLC last year just to do some basic stuff and importing and stuff like that, and exporting. And what I noticed was like all the paperwork I have to do is like almost not worth it. Like if I was at a bigger scale, then it'd be more worth doing. But because I kind of do it at small scale, it makes it just kind of a pain in the butt. Like, and also for example, you want to build a shed in your backyard or something to store your garden tools, and if it's over a certain size, the city will come and tell you to tear it down if you didn't get permission, or you went over the regulated size or whatever. That stuff. I mean, if it's safe and whatever, I don't see why it should be a problem. But I guess they have to have rules, the bureaucrats, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, did people building sheds in their backyards for the last 100 years lead to all sorts of catastrophic problems? No. so suddenly, I mean, again, that's a topic. I built a shop. 15 years ago on my property, I must have gone to that city planner engineer to get, with my drawings like 7 times in the course of 3 weeks. I was losing my mind. I'm like,
Mhm.
every time I bring him in the drawing, you'd be like, oh, the sonnet tubes for your foundation, or I didn't notice on the first time they're only 12 inches. They should be 18. I'm like, 12 inches, man, 12 inches is fine in almost every jurisdiction I've ever worked in. Then you want 18? Why? And that was an example of I live in a county that was just literally passing rules to be a little bit stricter than everybody else. Like there's no real benefit. Like I said, it's not like, show me the evidence that that dozens of people were dying every year falling off their decks in this country. Oh, none. Well, yeah, I agreed.
Yeah.
I agreed to put a rail on my deck that's 2 feet off the ground, but come on, like seriously, a 2-foot deck. My grandfather would have built a deck 3 feet off the ground, and he didn't put a set of stairs and a rail just because. But today you have to. Yeah.
Yeah.
For every new rule they pass, they should have to remove one rule. That I think that would make sense. You know what I mean? Like there's so many rules now. So many rules.
It's too much. It gets in the way. Like you kind of lose your motivation to do certain things. Like, well, if I gotta do this, then there's 15 different steps I gotta take, or I could just not do it. And then not doing stuff's super easy, compared to doing stuff. So,
and we're actually at the point where there's so many rules, and then some of them contradict each other. I can't think of one right off the top of my head, but you know what I mean. Like it's like
I've heard of some.
Yeah, you want me to put a fence, that's okay. But then the other rule says that I have to be able to I can't put a fence within such a distance from a sidewalk. And then another rule says that if I put a sidewalk, I have to put something. You go, well, the rules are in such conflict that I can't find a solution to the problem. That they're too complicated. So
then the fines come out.
Yeah. And then you bring out the people who love to complain, which we saw again here in Calgary during these water restrictions. They published the stats on that. They opened a complaint line, and you're not allowed to water your lawn. You're not allowed to do this and do that. And suddenly people are just complaining against their neighbors because their neighbors are watering their lawns. It's
Stasi.
Absolutely. I hate that.
The water Stasi.
Yeah. Live and let live, man. Live and let live to a certain extent, anyways.
Yeah. It's within limits, like within reason, right? Within common sense. Yep. So you told me and the crowd at the We Unify conference, so like what you did and how do you get into what you're doing now with like Clyde and your channel. So what could you tell for the audience? How did you get into this?
Into what? Into podcasting or to
podcasting,
Twitter?
Podcasting, Twitter, online activism in some sense.
Yeah. So what I tell people is I've been present on social media for a long time, for about a decade. My first social media for me was YouTube. I was well known on YouTube for outdoor adventures, nothing political. And I'll talk about myself in the third person. Marty's not a political guy. Engineers seldom are political. Living in northern Alberta up until, let's say, 2014, if you told me that I'm paying a little bit extra taxes and there's transfer payments going to Ottawa and I'm not getting everything my fair share back, I didn't care. Really didn't care, right? I had a good living, paid a little extra taxes, but kids are doing well, family's doing well, and it's all good. 2014, we had a downturn in the economy. The price of oil took a crash, and that's okay. We'll weather that. But then 2015 comes around, and there's a double whammy. We elect Trudeau in Ottawa, and here in Alberta, we elected Rachel Notley. Oof. And they didn't help the downturn in the economy. They saw the crash of the oil price as an opportunity. They saw that as the beginning of the end. These are people who hate oil and have this crazy ideology of this green future. So they saw the downturn as an opportunity to really push their ideology. And suddenly I found myself being, not supported by my government, but in fact being targeted by my government and attacked by my government.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an independent thinking redneck, acreage living, gun owning, oil drilling engineer. So Trudeau and Notley didn't like me, and so I took to Twitter, and I discovered Twitter, but I took to Twitter as as full blown political blood sport, and that's where and it grew from there. It just grew from there.
How many times have you been banned?
Oh, well, you're showing it on the screen there. It's Marty Up North _2. So the original Twitter account would have been Marty Up North, which was my YouTube channel. Then Marty Up North got blasted. So that became Marty Up North _1. And then that got blasted. So now I'm Marty Up North _2. Yeah. That trick to just a heads up to people, right? When you see accounts like that, you see people that have accounts 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's how many times they've been blasted. I know specifically, I remember getting my first 2 accounts blasted. They got blasted during COVID. During COVID, prior to Elon buying Twitter, the censorship was brutal. And if you dared challenge the COVID narrative a little too much, like, in those days, we wouldn't use the word vaccine. Like, you type it out as V, ampersand, CX, whatever. You'd make a spelling mistake to try and fool the algorithm. But what I would do is I was constantly, I'm known on Twitter as Marty Up North, unacceptable fact checker. That's my background as an engineer. That's what I do on Twitter every day. Like, every morning I wake up and I see something, I see a tweet, and then I dissect it. And not any tweet, but generally I see tweets that something doesn't make sense, like, or there's a story behind, right? Like, for instance, this morning, the announcement that Ford won't be proceeding with building electric vehicles in Ontario. They're reneging on that contract. So it's like, okay, well, let's explore that. Anyways, during COVID, I was doing a lot of challenging the COVID narrative all the time. But I always made sure I had references, put a reference to a government report or something like that. And then they couldn't cancel you because you were using government data as the basis. And then I'd use language like, in my opinion, right? You'd say, I read this report, and in my opinion, my conclusion is different. Well, then every time I forgot to quote properly, boom, account canceled. Like, that's the brutalness of the censorship in those days. Elon fixed that. Thank God for Elon. I mean, now, after Elon took over, I was still nervous, right? You still hesitate, but now I'm back to normal. Well, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I got banned as well during that period, and I was just off Twitter for like 6 months. But every once in a while, I would like reapply to see if I can get my account back, and every time I would just get no. But then eventually, when Elon bought it, I said, this is what I wrote. I wrote, hey, you should reinstate me, because Elon said everyone's getting second chances. And then it was like reinstated within like 12 hours. I was back on. And so I've built up since then. But I got the last time I got banned, or one of my accounts is just gone. I can't get it back because I said something like, because I was really pissed because of the COVID mandates. And I said, I hope the prime minister we have gets in a car accident or something like that. I think I said that, and then I got banned for that because I was what do you call it, calling for violence or something. Fair enough.
I got banned one account for saying something similar. I'm like, do we need to take out the tar and feathers? That was literally do we need to take out the tar and feathers, and that was deemed inciting violence. So
yeah. I mean,
so that was my quick story on Twitter, and then Clyde, you mentioned Clyde, a good British Columbian, and Clyde told his story at the conference there, how he basically same as me, he'd been on YouTube doing automotive repairs and things like that, and then he went to started live tweeting about the truck convoy. And then that's where our paths sort of intersected, somewhere around there. I like you today, you called me on your podcast. So Clyde just out of the blue asked me if I wanted to go meet with, chat with him, and then that led to us doing a weekly show.
Yeah, I think it's a really cool story. Very wholesome,
Well, and the other thing I should have mentioned about that story is it's one of my philosophies in life too, right? Like if somebody says, "Hey," reaches out to me and says, "Hey, Marty, you got time for coffee?" Of course, I got time for coffee. Like that, that meeting online is cool, but meeting in person is even cooler.
Hmm.
And you never know, not that I don't go into I don't go into any meeting automatically thinking that there has to be something in it for me. No, but I go into the meeting going, what if there is something in it for us, right? So me and Clyde just chatted, and it turned into I mean, if you told me 3 years ago when I first met Clyde that someday him and I'd be on stage at a conference in Victoria, I was like, that's insane, right? It's
Yeah, yeah,
crazy.
that's
So who
pretty
knows
cool.
where we might end up with this, right? I mean, I'm sure we'll meet again in person. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, never say
Well,
no, man. To
well, you're in Calgary, and I was thinking because my great grandfather's gravestone's there in the veteran cemetery, so I think at some point I want to go check that out. But that might not be for a couple years, but I definitely want to check that out someday.
yeah,
So that gives me an excuse to go out. Then we can
yeah,
maybe
yeah,
meet for coffee then.
absolutely. More like a beer. I'm done with
Yeah,
coffee. Let's do
yeah,
beers.
yeah. Hit the pub. Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's a question for you. How has your life been since becoming like involved on the online stuff? Have you seen any like effects? Have you been like I want to say brutalized, but attacked, or how's that been for you?
No, for me, it's been overwhelmingly positive.
Oh, good.
In fact, my interactions for a couple of reasons. First of all, I try. I am, yes, I am conservative, right leaning kind of thing, but I am not. I'm not partisan.
Hmm.
So, for instance, lately I've been, critical of Danielle Smith, and I'll be critical of Poiliev. I'll be critical of anybody, right? So
Hmm.
people start to realize that I'm not partisan. I'm just a guy who's trying to state facts, and I try to not be hyperbolic. So that doesn't open me up to a lot of attacks. That's one thing. The other thing is
Hmm.
I'm a male, and I have female colleagues. Yeah, like some of the girls on Twitter, like the stuff they get in their direct messages and stuff. It's disgusting. Like,
Hmm.
and then the other thing is I call it curating. I try to manage my followers, right? So if somebody follows me and starts to not really contribute to the conversation, I'll mute them and I won't
Hmm.
engage with them, or I'll
Hmm.
block them in some instances. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to keep my list of followers real, and then I interact. I'm not just tweeting, I'm also commenting back and forth.
Yeah.
And so yeah, the experience for me has been overwhelmingly positive. And then there's these extra benefits like this, like you reaching out to me and saying, do you want to chat? Absolutely. Getting invited to conferences. um the other thing I really love, in the journalists, this drives the journalists nuts and the politicians, it drives them nuts. But we build a network. I mean, I have this huge network that's been built, and I have people that share information that they won't even share with journalists or politicians or other people. So I have
Hmm.
people that'll send me like, I won't even tell you what case, but there's a case going on right now, and somebody shared, a plea bargain from one of the cases, and you go, wow, this is insane. So,
Hmm.
the politicians and the media are going to have to learn that we're a new force to be reckoned with. The independent media is powerful, including you, right? Keep doing this, man. Like, every bit helps. Like, this didn't exist 20 years ago. Podcasting did not exist 20 years ago.
Oh, even like a couple years, I got the idea to sort of like use YouTube a couple years ago. I just been super busy with kids, so I never have time. But then I was like, well, if I schedule it right, if I slot things in the right time slots, I can probably fit something in. I figure if I'm doing something, it's better than nothing. So yeah, that's what I guess that's what you're kind of saying is if you do something, it's Clyde do something, right? Like
Yeah.
in some sense, right? Um, but yeah, so that's basically what I've been trying to do. Is just kind of like go where I can, like fit in the slots that I can. So
Yeah.
no, it's true. I mean, my channel's not very big, but since I've been doing these interviews, it's been the idea is to kind of like show that we're human beings and that all the if anybody attacks us, then it's like, well, you're attacking this guy that's been talking for an hour or whatever on the this little tiny channel, and it's been completely like it's all love. There's no hate. There's no animosity or anything about anything
I,
really.
No, great point. And that's how we that is one of the secrets, that's part of my secret to success is to make sure that you always inject something personal. People say that to me all the time. Like, why would you say something personal on Twitter? It's like, well, that's why, right?
Mhm.
It ensures that it's an alibi if we get accused of being unreal. If somebody says I'm a bot, I'm like, no, you can go, here's an interview I did with Norman for an hour, like you said, or here's a picture of me with my kids doing some flooring in a condo recently, or here's me, whatever, eating a cheeseburger at McDonald's. But
Yeah,
um, you know, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got another one. So I have two questions here. First one, I'll start with this one. Uh, what advice would you give to young men? I'm 36, so I'm not that young, but there's other guys that are much younger. In terms of relationships, masculinity, traditionalism, like versus sort of like progressivism, which I kind of consider to be like sort of like the liberal left guys that want to like trans your kids and all that sort of thing. Like, how do you have any advice for guys going through life? You've had more life experience than me, and probably much more than those guys.
My advice for life is it's a pretty simple formula, and it applies to family life, real life, political life, whatever job, which is try and find positive role models. Like, just like,
Mhm.
think of what you want to be and find those positive role models that emulate what you so that you can emulate what you want to be. So if you want to be adventurous, then find an adventurous role model. If you want to be a father and a good father, then find a positive father role model, whether you find him at work or even on television or whatever. Like, in person is the
Mhm.
best, right? Find role models and mentors. And then if you can't find a positive role model and you're surrounded by bad people, well, then those are negative role models, and you can learn something from negative role models. So,
Mhm.
that's role model for me. I've had great role models in life, and when I look back on my success, that's why I was successful, is because I had people teach me. Like, learning everything on your own is brutal, can be
Mhm.
done, but and then the other thing to recognize too is that just because people around us, especially family's not always good role models, right? And that's a tough one. Like this, I don't subscribe to the blood is thicker than wine, and family is everything. I don't subscribe to that. I say you don't choose your family, and you choose your friends and your role models. So that's
Hmm.
one bit of advice. The other bit of advice is, it's cliche, but again, it served me well, which is challenge yourself, man. And if
Mhm.
you get semi bored in a role or a job or a social media, like, I mean, I did YouTube, and I've transitioned from YouTube. I'm doing Twitter. I've changed jobs many times in life. I've moved.
Mhm.
Um, Change, right? Change. I like change. So,
Yeah,
but
it
then,
freshens things
yeah,
up.
yeah. I mean, but your question is very specific. I mean, yeah, I
Well,
don't know how to.
it's broad, but I just put a
Yeah,
bunch of different things there because I'm like, I don't know what you'd wanna touch on, so I was like, "Oh, I'll put a couple there, see what you think."
yeah,
Um, because a lot of things that's happening right now is like, guys, as you said, they're seeking out role models is a great idea, but a lot of guys are having trouble, like, discerning one from a good one from another, and, they don't really know, like, a lot of young guys are kind of they don't really know what masculinity is, for example. They look at guys like Andrew Tate, and I don't really think they're, like, the best example of um, what we necessarily want because they're sort of like, I don't know, playboys. That just seems like that wouldn't make a very good father figure. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
like in some sense, I mean, I don't want whatever people say about him. Like Donald Trump looks like a better father figure than Andrew Tate, and that's saying quite a bit, right? Because he's quite a busy guy. Um, but I don't know. I think like maybe look at if your parents aren't a good example, and grandparents, uncles and aunts, that sort of thing.
Actually, that's yeah. Do I?
Friends.
'Cause- yeah, no. For me, it was friends. For me, I left the house. I left home when I was 18 years old. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't have a really fun time at home. Had a
Mm,
mean father, so moved to Fox Creek, and then I found some older guys that were generally about 10 years older than me, and they became role models. That that's it. I
Hmm.
mean, it's also a different time. Yeah, I'm a bit older. I mean, I'm 57 years old. Like to me, this whole masculinity thing is a bizarre concept because I can't imagine not being masculine. But then I look around me and I see people like that, and I guess you know, as a really an extreme advice would be get out of the city and move to the country. Like that's another
Yeah.
bit of it. That's real advice, right? Like get a job in a man's field and if you want to be a man, then do manly things. And
Hmm.
living in a city and sipping lattes and worrying about the color of your shirt and doing your hair in the morning, that's not a manly thing. That's
Yeah.
do manly things if you want to be a man. It's not complicated. Learn to hunt.
Yeah, I often find like I'm mentoring guys that are have this um they have this lack of experience, I suppose. But for me, like I wasn't like I've always considered myself a very honorable person. I don't try to take advantage of anybody. I always like treat people with respect, as long as in assuming in the presumption that they will, and if they don't, then obviously I'll just like exit from that situation.
Yeah.
But 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 for me, I was never like the I wasn't a jock. I was kind of like, I did all different sorts of things. I was well rounded, but I definitely wasn't like the sports jock guy that was like, I played rugby and stuff, but I wasn't like I didn't consider myself like super masculine, though I considered myself a man, obviously. But I wasn't like the super tough guy that go, box to a boxing match or something like that, or box guys. But then I have people come up to me that are like, they've never been punched in the face or they've never been in a fight. And like, I've been in fights, and the only thing I can say, if you get in a fight, you got it. You just play to win. You don't.
That's an important one in life. Actually, it's incredible how many people have never been in the fights, and you
Yeah,
should experience it a couple of times. Actually, what did Mike Tyson say? Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So here's my next question. One day Trudeau will be gone. What do you see as the way forward after that? It's at some point. Um, I guess we're gonna have other problems, but once he's gone, what do you think is gonna happen?
We got a lot of repairs to do. He'll be
Well,
gone, and at this point, he'll be gone in 469 days, I think, or
I saw your
467.
yeah, I
Yeah,
saw your thing is 470 or something that said, but maybe you have an updated
yeah,
it.
yeah. Um, I, I think, unfortunately, I think Trudeau was an aberration. Like he was he is a terrible leader who abused our system and managed to stay in power by hook or by crook, right? I mean,
Hmm.
his first term, we can all be forgiven for electing him the first time. Then the second time, he took advantage of COVID and a few other things, and now he's dragging on there. But I honestly, I tweet about this every day. He's done a lot of damage to the economy, and it's all deja vu. Like the nothing's new. His father did something similar, bad
Hmm.
policies that led to high inflation, and the bank tried to counter that with high interest rates, and the damage done by Trudeau Senior took about 20 years to recover from. And I was hoping that we had learned our lessons from that, and we didn't. So, and history is repeating itself. So hopefully we're a little faster at repairing the damage. I'm going to make the bold assumption that Poilievre does get elected. And what's the damage that he has to reverse? Well, you mentioned it early on, right? We have to slow down immigration. Maybe not shut it off entirely, but we definitely have to slow down immigration.
Hmm.
We have to we'll have to have something that people don't like the term, but we'll have to have some austerity measures. We'll have to slow down, government spending and things like that. Probably reduce the size of the civil service,
Hmm.
but that can be offset. I think that can easily be offset by kickstarting the economy. I look at Canada's economy. I mean, we should be like we're blessed with everything, right? We're blessed with land, access to markets, resources, cheap energy, minerals, an intelligent labor pool, but we're completely unproductive and we keep shooting ourselves in the foot. And so I think Pierre will have to shrink the government, cut back on the spending, but make that pill easier to swallow by making sure that on the other side he kickstarts the economy and get back to doing what we were good at. And what are Canadians good at? We're good at extracting resources. I don't know why we criticize ourselves for doing that. Like, I don't know why we're ashamed of cutting trees and mining coal and extracting iron and drilling for oil. I don't know why we're ashamed of doing that, because we're good at it and everybody else wants it, and it could pay for a whole bunch of stuff. So I think that's the simple thing. That's what Poilievre will have some unpopular decisions to make, but I think he makes the pill easier to swallow by making sure that the economy's kickstarted. I mean, here's another example. Like I talk about this. Like, Canada doesn't even have a shipbuilding industry. Like, that's insane. Like, why? Like, we have
biggest
three
coastline
oceans
in the world.
Yeah, biggest coastline in the world. Electricity coming out of the wazoo. Deep water ports, iron, everything, skilled labor, and we don't build ships.
Yeah,
But you go to North Korea or you go to South Korea, tiny little country, and you have Samsung shipyards will build, a new super tanker every 6 weeks, and or you go to Norway and they build cruise ships and they build all sorts of fishing vessels, and like what do we build? So yeah.
Well, even when I went to Sweden, like they have big cable factories like that for those undersea cables for internet and I don't know, I guess just internet now,
Yeah.
and and they provide really good jobs for these small towns, and they also have in small land where I traveled to Sweden back in 2022 because I was on a trip to Europe, and I was like, okay, well, I can meet my family from Sweden that I met that I traced on 23andMe. I gave up my DNA, but now they can so they can trace me, I guess. But
Yeah.
but anyways, I went there, found the family there, and what I noticed, I was learning all this stuff because you'd think Sweden's kind of similar to Canada, like it's a Western nation, but it's way different. A lot of things are way different. It just looks like it's the same. But when you talk to the people, that they're very concerned about the environment. But what they do is, like, for example, they have trees everywhere, but they're all lined up perfectly. They're sort of grown like a farm, and so they grow the farm, and it takes 20 years for the trees to come up, and then they chop them down, and then they become IKEA furniture, and then they grow them again. They just can
absolutely.
and that's why
Well, it's a renewable resource, right? So we should be harvesting trees. But I want to come back to your question though. Trudeau did economic damage. That's fine. That's the easy stuff to reverse. The part that bothers me of the last 8 years is he's actually damaged some of our institutions, right? So if you look at, for instance, the RCMP, I think the RCMP is a shell of what it used to be. I mean, it used to be a proud policing force, and it's been reduced to something else. The courts are a joke. Like, he's made a mockery of the courts. The Canadian military, I mean, did we need to appoint the first female, lieutenant general to lead the Canadian Army? Sure, but then who did he appoint? I mean, the lady's a joke, and so the troops are demoralized. There's 16,000.
Wait, she didn't like go into the trenches and stuff.
I'm sure she did that. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he's wrecked a lot of institutions, and those are, and then here's the other terrible thing he did. He's been appointing senators left, right, and center. 80% of the senators currently in the Senate, and they're appointed for life, were appointed by Trudeau. So so no matter what, Poilievre, all future bills go through readings in the Senate before before royal assent, and so Trudeau is guaranteed that Poilievre will have a hard time undoing his damage. Which is why I'm fighting, man. I mean, my kids are older. I should be enjoying my retirement. And people ask me that. Why are you still active on Twitter and on the political scene? And by the way, I'm not just active on Twitter. Like, I go to constituency meetings, and I've been to the legislature. I go to conferences. I do things to bring back accountability in all our governments, not just provincial and federal, but also municipal. And I'm still battling because I think our poor kids, your kids, my kids, are one of the first generations that won't have it as good as their parents. I mean, it was every parent's generation, every parent's wish before us was always that their kids would do better, right? My dad wanted me to do better. Your dad wanted you to do better. And then I look at my kids today and go, man, you guys are born in like, wow, with the odds stacked against you. Why? Because of some idiots in Ottawa and in the provinces.
Well,
So
actually, when I did my speech in Tennessee last year,
Yeah.
it was based on this article I wrote called Exodus, and it was about how I felt about the COVID lockdown and how I felt so ostracized by like my community. And basically my idea was to sort of like go to a different country like southern Brazil or Uruguay or Paraguay or Argentina or something like that, and start like a
Yeah.
whole new community, because the taxes are very low. Like if you go to Paraguay, max tax rate is 10%.
Jeez.
And
Do you speak Spanish? Hopefully you speak Spanish.
I can speak Spanish. I can speak some
Yeah.
Spanish, and I'd be able to pick it up easy because I did learn it. And my wife's from Brazil, so she speaks Spanish and Portuguese. But I had this plan, so I laid it all out, and that's why I got into the conference, because I was trying to like explain this idea. I'm not really so into that now, but I can understand why, because like it's so cheap to go. Like you could, if you sold your house, let's say if you had a $500,000 house, that's the value you could take out of it. So you sell it, you get 500 grand. You move down there, you could buy literally a palatial mansion with a swimming pool, a place for like your you could have employees that work for
Probably
you.
a gardener and a small little suite for your cook and the gardener. Yeah.
A suite for them, and you pay them a little bit. But if you just had that, you could live like an absolute king down there, and you could buy a whole ranch with like 5 houses on it. Like with each one for each of your kids and their families. And if you could work online, then you could make an absolute killing, because 10% income tax is absolutely nothing, right? But then you look at here, you're paying like 50%. And also the healthcare there is just as good. Like you go to the hospital, it's private, but it's $50 to see a doctor.
Yeah.
Like, if I could pay $50 to see a doctor, I'd never use the public system, because like, we don't have the option to go to private. But sometimes, like if your kid breaks their arm, like, you're waiting a day and a half to get the arm fixed. It's like I would pay right now whatever it costs just so I could get it. But you can't even do that just so I can fix my kid, because I don't want my kid to be suffering, right?
That's a myth we've been told all our lives, right? Oh, Canadian healthcare is the best. No, it's not.
It's garbage.
It's garbage.
It's garbage. Yeah. Maybe the UK is worse, but the only reason UK is worse is because anybody can go there and get it. Like here, you have to be part of the system, but in the UK, we could go to the UK and get healthcare there, like, which is kind of stupid. So you could just hop the border and get free healthcare that you never paid for. But yeah, so in Paraguay and stuff like that, they have all the modern services, but everything's like 1/10 the price. So I was thinking this would be a good idea. And I don't think I don't want to do that though. I want my country to function. I want to have a place where I grew up, where my great grandparents were from, to like function for my descendants. But I don't know if that's going to be possible. Even retirement, I'm thinking I might not stay here, because like, who knows? It depends on what happens, obviously. But
yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, I'm not stuck here. I am here, and I want to stay here. I want to fight for it. But to be honest, I've even told my sons. I mean, my 3 sons graduated engineering, and I said, hey, if you really want to get ahead, you should leave this country right now, and you should go exactly to the places you mentioned. You should go to, Argentina or Brazil or someplace like that, and go do some oil and gas over there, not here. And that's happening. There is a brain drain. There's a brain drain going on in Canada.
Yeah, and it goes back to your productivity thing. Like, is our productivity the lowest in the developed world, essentially? Something like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Something like that.
And the only real, we're not that much different than Americans, like genetically, physically. We're not that much different than Europeans. We're not that much different than most of the world, except maybe it's our regulations or something. Maybe it's like these Laurentian elites or something putting in these rules so that you can't get ahead. There is sort of like a power balances in Canada. Like the West has the sort of oil money guys, and back east you have like the old money. Trudeau is a Laurentian through and through.
The American dream is an amazing thing, though. It is, when you spend a lot of time in the U.S., you witness it. Like the idea of an American growing up and thinking I'm going to make it big. It's like it's in their DNA, and and they chase it. And then when an American makes it big, you come out of the door in Colorado and you see your neighbor just bought himself a brand new F-150 pickup. You go, hey, Jack, looks like business is good, man. Congratulations. Nice looking truck, You do the same thing in Canada, and everybody goes, oh, must be nice. What'd you do? How'd you get that truck? Like we don't encourage each other. We're not productive. We're not, I love my American cousins. I wish I would spend more time in the U.S. I spend a lot of time working down there, and now that I'm retired, I don't go there as much. But
Well, the dollar value is still hard.
Oh my God. Well, that's the other thing people forget, right? I mean, inflation is bad enough right now, sitting at whatever 2.7%, but the Canadian dollar is also down in like the 70-cent range. So we're getting and everything we buy comes from, we send raw materials to the US and then we buy back cars, televisions, and everything else. And with the exchange rate and inflation, man, we're hurting. Our dollar is not stretching right now.
For sure. Well, hey, we're coming up on an hour, or come up to an hour. I know you got a hard out soon, so don't want to keep you from your family. But is there anything else you want to add before I shut her down?
Well, no, yeah. Sorry to cut it short, but let's do this again, man. We'll, today was call this just a quick intro. Let's hook up again. Let's do this again, and do part 2 and part 3. I mean, kind of like Clyde. We're just barely scratching the surface on this one.
Lots of depth here. Like we have way more to talk about.
And the other thing I want to talk with you and with Clyde a little bit is, I want to make this a two-way conversation, and I am especially fascinated with what's going on in your neck of the woods with your upcoming election, right? I mean, Clyde did me a favor when we last year when we were having an election in Alberta, and we talked about it, and I want to talk about it with you guys and help you guys as much as possible, because I'd love nothing more than my Western cousins electing a conservative government. That would be so awesome. So awesome.
I think it's going to happen. I know I joined this. I joined that party actually back probably 2015, I think, when they had less than 10,000 members.
Yeah.
I think we even had maybe less than maybe even just over 1,000 actually. It might be even less than 10,000, but yeah, it's a lot of, who knows what's going to happen now. It's like, the whole script is flipped, But,
some of it is riding the wave of popularity that with Poilievre, sure, but and Trump. I mean, we never even talked about Trump. I mean, it's I've had 2 or 3 podcasts this week, and they've been completely dominated by Trump. What a powerful figure that guy is, and what an iconic figure, right? I mean, what will they say about Trump 100 years from now? It'll be fascinating.
All I can think is mandate of heaven after that bullet dodge. That's amazing. Yeah. Like, he should be dead, but like, for the grace of God, he's here.
My first reaction when when was that? That was Saturday, right? It was last Saturday that it happened. Yeah, Saturday.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I was at a baptism.
Yeah, you were at a baptism, and I was out on the water floating with friends and just having a nice afternoon. And I come home, it's like, whoa, what just happened here? And my first tweet following that event was that we just avoided a civil war in the U.S. I think somebody assassinating Trump could have had some very nasty, violent consequences. So yes, you're right. But for the grace of God, he turned his head just at the right time. So no, listen, Norman, awesome chat, man. Short, but let's pick up where we left off, and let's do this again in a couple of weeks for sure.
All right, take her easy, Marty. Thanks for being here. It's been great.
Thank you. All right, cheers, everyone.